Under the eerie glow of a full moon, a wounded mother bobcat limps through the dense pine forest, her 3 tiny cubs struggling to keep up. Blood mats her fur as a bolt of lightning slices through the night, briefly revealing her destination, a forest ranger's cabin. She pauses, instinct screaming danger, but the sickness coursing through her body and the weakening cries of her cubs leave her no choice. She moves forward, toward the one place wild animals are taught to fear the most. What could drive a desperate mother bobcat to seek human help? What dark secret lurks in the heart of this untouched wilderness, something so deadly, it threatens to poison an entire ecosystem? Stay with us as we uncover a heartbreaking truth that will shake an entire community and forever change how we see the fragile balance between mankind and nature. But before we dive in, let us know where you're watching from. And if this story moves you, hit that subscribe button, because tomorrow, I've got something even more incredible to share. Rain lashed against the windows of Whispering Pines' cabin as Michael Everett sat at his desk, the warm glow of his lamp illuminating 3 decades of meticulously documented wildlife observations. At 58, his beard now more salt than pepper, Michael had spent more time among the towering trees and silent creatures of Pine Ridge National Forest than with people. And that suited him just fine, especially after Caroline's passing 5 years ago. He rubbed his tired eyes, glancing at the framed photo on his desk. Caroline, smiling beside him at Black Bear Pass, her favorite spot in the forest. Just 6 months before the diagnosis. The doctors had been baffled at first. How could a healthy 52-year-old woman develop such an aggressive form of cancer? The answer had come too late to save her, but early enough to fuel Michael's relentless dedication to protecting the wilderness they had both loved. A sharp scratching at the door yanked him from his thoughts. Probably just a branch, tossed by the storm. He turned back to his logbook until a sound made his blood run cold. A yowl. Low, desperate, unmistakably feline. But too large to be a house cat. Michael grabbed his flashlight, moving cautiously toward the door. Nearly 3 decades as a ranger had taught him respect for the wilderness, for its predators. He flicked on the porch light and peered through the rain-streaked window. And what he saw made him freeze. There, pressed against the door, was a mother bobcat. Her tiny, spotted coat was soaked, darkened by rain and something else, blood. She stared at him with desperate amber eyes, unflinching, unafraid. Behind her, almost invisible against the wooden porch, 3 tiny cubs huddled together, their frail bodies trembling. What in the world? Michael whispered. The mother swayed, barely able to stand, yet her gaze never left his. Something was terribly wrong. In all his years, he had never seen a bobcat willingly approach a human dwelling. And certainly not with cubs in tow. Behind him, the radio crackled to life. "Mike, you there? It's Tyler. Just checking in before the storm knocks out communications." Michael didn't take his eyes off the bobcat. Reaching back for the radio, he pressed the button. "Tyler, I've got a situation. Female bobcat. 3 cubs. On my porch." A pause. "Trapped by the storm?" "No. She came here deliberately. She's injured. Something's not right. Want me to call Dr. Carter?" Michael hesitated. Amelia Carter was the best wildlife vet in 3 counties, but in this weather, it would take hours for her to reach the cabin. "Yes. But tell her I might need to take emergency measures before she gets here." The mother bobcat let out another sound, softer this time. Almost a plea. Michael's eyes dropped to the smallest cub. It had collapsed onto its side, barely moving. His stomach clenched. "I'll call you back," he said, setting down the radio. Years of training told him to keep his distance, to wait for professional help. But something in the mother bobcat's eyes, intelligence, desperation, trust, made him reach for his first aid kit instead. Pulling on thick leather gloves, he moved slowly, his voice low and steady. "Easy now. I don't know why you came here, but I'm going to help if I can." To his astonishment, the mother bobcat didn't flee. She didn't snarl or bare her teeth. Instead, she stepped back, positioning herself between him and her cubs, but making no move to attack. Michael opened the door just enough to slide a folded wool blanket onto the porch. "Let's get your little ones out of this rain." For a long moment, the mother bobcat didn't move. Then, as if understanding, she nudged her cubs toward the blanket. The two stronger ones responded, dragging themselves toward the warmth. But the third remained still. Michael's heart sank. Without thinking of his own safety, he stepped onto the porch, kneeling beside the lifeless cub. The mother tensed, but didn't strike, as he gently lifted it. Its breathing was shallow. Its tiny body burned with fever. Up close, he noticed something odd. A yellowish crust around its eyes and mouth. Symptoms he had never seen in healthy wildlife. "What happened to you, little one?" he murmured. A flash of lightning illuminated the mother bobcat's face. Michael's breath caught in his throat. The same yellow residue rimmed her mouth. And now he saw the truth. What he had mistaken for blood was something far worse. A strange, yellow-tinged fluid. Something was poisoning them. And whatever it wasn't natural. Seeping from a wound on her shoulder, the mother bobcat swayed again, barely clinging to consciousness. Michael made a split-second decision. Ignoring every wildlife management protocol drilled into him over decades, he pushed the door open wider. "Come inside. All of you." Bringing wild predators indoors was unheard of, dangerous, reckless. But leaving them out in this storm? That was a death sentence. At least for the sick cub. Maybe for all three. To his astonishment, the mother bobcat hesitated only briefly before nudging her two stronger cubs toward the door. Michael stepped inside first, still cradling the weakest cub, and quickly made a nest from blankets in the farthest corner, away from his sleeping area, but warm and dry. Once her cubs were inside, the mother bobcat finally surrendered, collapsing onto the wooden floor with a soft, exhausted whimper. Michael worked fast, placing the sick cub in the nest and gently pulling the mother beside it. The two stronger cubs immediately pressed against her, their tiny bodies shivering. Reaching for his phone, he prayed the storm hadn't knocked out the signal. "Amelia, it's Michael Everett." "Michael, I just got a call from your trainee about a bobcat." "Yeah, but things have changed. They're inside my cabin now. One cub is critical. The mother's not much better." A beat of silence. Then Amelia's voice, sharp with disbelief. "You brought a wild bobcat family into your cabin? Amelia, you don't understand. They came to me. The mother brought them to my door. I've never seen anything like it." Another pause. Then, more cautiously. "That's unprecedented behavior." "There's more," Michael said, lowering his voice as he watched the bobcat family. "They're showing symptoms I can't identify. Yellow discharge from the eyes and mouth. High fever. Weakness. And the mother's wound." He hesitated. "It's seeping the same yellow fluid." A sharp inhale from Amelia. "Michael, don't touch that discharge without protection. I'm on my way, but with this storm, it'll take at least 3 hours." "The cub doesn't have 3 hours." "Okay," Amelia said, all hesitation gone. "What supplies do you have?" As Michael listed off the contents of his emergency kit, he kept his eyes on the mother bobcat. Even in her weakened state, she remained alert, watching him. Trusting him. Or maybe warning him. "I'm going to walk you through some emergency care procedures," Amelia said. "But Michael, be careful. Even a sick bobcat is still a wild predator." For the next hour, Michael followed Amelia's instructions, administering subcutaneous fluids to the weakest cub, cleaning the mother's wound with a diluted antiseptic solution, and taking careful notes on their symptoms. But what struck him most was Aspen, his name for her now, after the grove where he'd often seen bobcats hunting. Despite her pain, despite everything, she allowed him to treat her cubs. Even let him tend to her own wound. She never once tried to strike him. Instead, she just watched. And in her amber eyes, Michael saw something he couldn't quite explain. A message. An urgency. As if she was trying to tell him something. "I've never seen a predator act like this," he admitted when he called Amelia again. "It's like she knows I'm trying to help." "Animals can sometimes sense intention," Amelia replied, her windshield wipers audible over the call. "But I agree. This is extraordinary. There's something else." Michael hesitated before speaking again. "The wound on the mother, it doesn't look like an animal attack. Or a trap injury. It almost looks deliberate. Like someone, or something, burned her. Chemical burn? Maybe. And there's a smell. Sweet, but acrid. Take samples if you can. But don't expose yourself. I'm driving as fast as I safely can." After hanging up, Michael sat on the floor a few feet from the makeshift nest, watching Aspen and her cubs. She had finally succumbed to exhaustion, her body curled protectively around them. 2 of the cubs nursed weakly. The third barely moved, its tiny chest rising and falling in shallow breaths. Outside, the storm raged. But inside the cabin, a strange peace had settled. Michael exhaled and, almost without thinking, spoke softly to the sleeping Bobcat. "Who did this to you?" he murmured. "And how did you know to come here?" His cabin was miles from the nearest road, deep in the forest. Even locals had trouble finding it. Yet somehow, this wild animal had made her way straight to his door. The radio crackled. "Michael, it's Tyler. Any update on the Bobcat situation?" Michael gave him a quick rundown, ending with, "Dr. Carter's on her way, but she won't be here for hours. You need backup? I could try to make it out there." "No. Stay put. The roads will be washed out by now. I've got the situation under control." As he set the radio down, something caught his eye. Something he hadn't noticed before. Around Aspen's neck, the fur was rubbed away in a thin line. A distinctive marking. Like a collar. Michael's pulse quickened. Bobcats didn't wear collars. Unless. "Were you part of the research study?" he muttered under his breath, moving closer. Aspen's eyes snapped open. She locked onto his gaze, then made a tiny movement with her head, just the slightest dip. Almost like a nod. Then, slowly, she turned her head toward the window. Toward the storm. Toward something out there in the dark. Michael followed her gaze. His stomach tightened. "Whitewater Creek," he murmured. "Is that where you came from?" Aspen blinked. Slowly. Deliberately. Still staring in that direction. Michael felt a chill crawl up his spine. And for the first time that night, it had nothing to do with the storm. Whitewater Creek. The river that ran down from Twin Peaks. The place where, 6 months ago, a mining company had been shut down for illegal dumping. The watershed that supplied drinking water to Aspen Grove and the surrounding communities. The same watershed recently opened for limited development by Harrington Construction, despite protests from environmental groups. The same company whose chemical plant had been linked to Caroline's rare cancer. The same company that had settled out of court without admitting wrongdoing. Michael's hands clenched into fists. "No," he whispered. "It can't be happening again." But as he looked at the sick cubs, at the poisoned mothers struggling for breath, and at the strange yellow discharge oozing from their wounds, a terrible suspicion took root in his mind. If he was right, these bobcats weren't just victims of some isolated environmental accident. They were the first signs of something much bigger. Something that could threaten not just wildlife, but thousands of people. A pitiful mew broke through his thoughts, dragging him back to the immediate crisis. Theories could wait. Right now, these animals needed him. He turned back to the first aid kit, drawing another dose of fluids. "Hang on, little ones," he murmured. "Help is coming." As if she understood, Aspen made a soft chuffing sound. Her amber eyes stayed locked on his, filled with something that hit Michael harder than any suspicion, any theory, any rage. It was trust. A mother's silent plea. A wild creature placing her family's survival in the hands of a human. Outside, lightning ripped through the sky, illuminating the shadowy peaks in the distance, twin peaks, where secrets lay buried beneath the soil, waiting to be uncovered. The storm was passing. But for Michael Everett and the Bobcat family seeking refuge in his cabin, the real tempest was just beginning. Telling this story took a lot of time and effort, so if you're enjoying it, hit that subscribe button. It really helps us out. Now, back to the story. Dawn broke over Pine Ridge Forest, pale light pushing through the lingering storm clouds. The rain had finally stopped. Michael jerked awake at the sound of tires crunching over wet gravel outside. Blinking the sleep from his eyes, he checked on the Bobcat family. Still alive. The mother stirred at his approach, her eyes fluttering open just long enough to register his presence before exhaustion pulled her back under. A sharp knock at the door. Then the cabin door swung open, and Dr. Amelia Carter stepped inside, shaking the rain from her jacket. At 45, Amelia carried herself with the quiet confidence of someone who had seen it all when it came to wildlife. Dark hair pulled back in a no-nonsense ponytail, sharp brown eyes scanning the room with professional detachment until she spotted the Bobcats in the corner. Then, disbelief flickered across her face. "My God, Michael," she breathed. "When you said they were inside, I thought you meant a porch enclosure or something." "I know it sounds crazy," Michael admitted, already anticipating her reaction. "But you had to see how she acted. She brought them here, Amelia." Deliberately. Amelia approached the makeshift nest cautiously, her experienced gaze taking in every detail. When she finally spoke, her voice was softer, but no less serious. "In 20 years of veterinary practice, I have never seen a wild predator seek human help. It goes against every survival instinct they have." "Unless," Michael countered, "survival instinct is exactly what drove her here." Amelia didn't argue. Not yet. Instead, she crouched beside the nest. "Let's focus on assessment first. Theories later." For the next hour, they worked together. Michael held each cub gently but firmly while Amelia examined them with expert precision. The mother Bobcat, Aspen, as Michael had started calling her, watched every move, her body tense but still. She only growled once, low in warning, when the weakest cub let out a sharp cry during a blood draw. Michael stroked the cub's fur instinctively, murmuring soothing words. Aspen's ears flicked, but she didn't lash out. She was watching. Waiting. Trusting. Amelia held up a vial of the strange yellow discharge, turning it in the light. Her frown deepened. "I've never seen anything like this," she said. "The texture is odd. Sticky, but also crystalline around the edges. And the smell." She leaned in, inhaling cautiously. "Sweet, but acrid. Almost like." She stopped. Michael's stomach tightened. Amelia moved onto Aspen's shoulder wound, carefully peeling back the matted fur. When she finally spoke again, her voice was grim. "This isn't a bite wound. Or a trap injury." "Then what?" Michael asked, his gut already telling him the answer. "Definitely chemical in nature," Amelia said, running a gloved hand along the discolored tissue. "See the burn pattern? Classic signs of a chemical burn." Michael exhaled through his nose. The suspicion that had formed during the night now felt like a solid weight in his chest. "From what?" he asked, though he already had a name in mind. "I'll need to run tests to be sure," Amelia said, administering antibiotics and setting up an IV for the sickest cub. "But my first guess? Some kind of industrial chemical. A pesticide, maybe. Or waste from manufacturing," Michael finished. Amelia looked up sharply. "What are you thinking?" Michael's jaw tightened. "Harrington." A heavy silence settled between them. "The construction company?" Amelia asked. They started clearing land near Twin Peaks 2 months ago, Michael said, voice clipped. County approved it despite conservation concerns. Victor Harrington promised minimal environmental impact. The bitterness in his tone was unmistakable. Same company, he added, that ran the chemical plant in Caroline's hometown. Amelia flinched. She knew. She had seen firsthand how Caroline's illness had destroyed Michael. How it had turned him from a passionate advocate into a man who barely spoke to the world anymore. Michael. She started, choosing her words carefully. I know what you're thinking. But we can't jump to conclusions. We need evidence. Michael's eyes darkened. His voice was quiet, but firm. Look at the evidence right in front of you. Aspen. The Cubs. The burns. The sickness. The yellow discharge. All leading back to one place. Twin Peaks. Michael gestured toward the sick bobcat. Something poisoned them. And these aren't animals that would just wander onto a construction site by accident. They live deep in the forest. Which means if it is chemical contamination, it's spreading. Probably through the water. His eyes flicked to the topographical map pinned to the wall. He traced the lines with his finger, stopping at one spot. Aspen was trying to tell me something, he murmured. She kept looking toward Whitewater Creek. Amelia exhaled. Michael, bobcats don't tell humans anything. Then how do you explain her bringing her cubs here? To me, the one person who might actually help them? Amelia hesitated. I don't have an explanation for that. But we need more than sick bobcats and a hunch to go after Harrington Construction. They have an army of lawyers who'd bury us. Michael set his jaw. Then we gather evidence. Starting with water samples from Whitewater Creek. Amelia's expression tightened. Michael, you can't just. These bobcats aren't the only ones drinking from that watershed. The words hit like a gut punch. Amelia's protest died on her lips. She knew what that meant. If Michael was right, this wasn't just about poisoned wildlife. This was a potential public health emergency. She exhaled sharply. I'll take the samples I collected to my lab right away, she said. But we should notify the Forest Service and EPA if you suspect water contamination. And let Harrington's friends and county government bury the investigation before it even starts? Michael shook his head. No. We need irrefutable proof first. He glanced at Aspen and her cubs. The mother bobcat was still watching him with those unblinking amber eyes, as if she understood what was at stake. I'm going up to Whitewater Creek. As soon as someone can watch over these bobcats. I can send my assistant, Megan. She's trained in wildlife rehabilitation, Amelia said, packing up her medical kit. But Michael, be careful. If there's something toxic enough to do this, she gestured to Aspen's wound, you shouldn't be exposed to it either. I've got protective gear from the Forest Service. I'll be fine. Amelia hesitated. When she spoke again, her voice was quieter. It's not just physical dangers I'm worried about. Michael met her gaze. Victor Harrington has powerful friends. If you're right about him cutting corners on environmental protections, he won't appreciate anyone poking around. Michael's expression hardened. All the more reason to do it. The radio crackled to life. Michael, it's Tyler. Just checking in after the storm. Michael grabbed the receiver. I'm here. Dr. Carter arrived safely. The bobcats are stable for now. Good to hear it. Listen, there's something you should know. Sheriff Lawson called the station this morning, says they got reports of trespassers up near the Harrington development site. Asked if we had any rangers in the area. Michael and Amelia exchanged glances. Thanks for the heads up, Ty, Michael said carefully. Any idea who reported the trespassers? Security company Harrington hired. Sheriff didn't give details, but said to remind all Forest Service personnel that the development site is private property now, even though it borders protected land. Convenient timing. Michael let out a slow breath after signing off. You think they know you suspect something? Amelia asked. I think Harrington's people are nervous about anyone getting too close. Michael checked his watch. You should get those samples to your lab. The sooner we know what we're dealing with, the better. Amelia nodded but hesitated at the door. What are you going to do in the meantime? Michael looked at Aspen. She was still watching him, her gaze unnervingly sharp. It was as if she knew what he was about to say. I'm going to find out exactly where she came from. And what happened to her there. After Amelia left, Michael knelt beside the bobcat nest again. The weakest cub was finally sleeping peacefully. The 4 fluids and medication were working. The other 2 had regained enough strength to nurse, an encouraging sign, according to Amelia. Michael exhaled, running a hand through his hair. You came to the right place, he murmured to Aspen. Now I need to understand why. He spread his detailed forest maps across the floor, pointing at key locations as he spoke, as if Aspen could somehow confirm what he was thinking. Twin Peaks. Whitewater Creek. Black Bear Pass. At the mention of Whitewater Creek, Aspen's ears twitched forward slightly. Michael's phone buzzed, interrupting the one-sided conversation. Michael, it's Maria Rodriguez from the Aspen Grove Gazette. Michael frowned. He hadn't spoken to the local newspaper's environmental reporter in months, not since she tried to interview him about the county's decision to sell part of the watershed land to Harrington. How did you get this number, Maria? Tyler gave it to me. Don't be mad at him, I can be very persuasive. Michael sighed. What do you want? Information. I've been digging into Harrington construction for months. Their environmental impact statements don't add up. And now I'm hearing rumors about wildlife acting strange near their development site. Michael stiffened. What kind of behavior? Animals fleeing the area, for starters. Hunters are reporting weird migration patterns. Species abandoning their usual territories. And now, I hear you've got an injured bobcat family at your cabin. Michael's grip on the phone tightened. Who told you that? Small town, big gossip. But Michael, that's not normal. You know it's not. Share what you found with me, and I'll share what I know. Michael hesitated. He looked at Aspen, curled protectively around her cubs. If Maria published an expose on Harrington, it could blow this open before the company had a chance to bury the truth. But it could also tip them off, make them cover their tracks before he could get the proof he needed. He exhaled. This was bigger than just a poisoned bobcat. Bigger than him. All right, Maria, he said slowly. Tell me what you know. Michael knew that accusing Harrington Construction without solid proof would invite a legal firestorm. But Maria already had her own evidence. Meet me at Eliza Green's place tomorrow morning, he told her. She's been monitoring Whitewater Creek for a decade. And her property isn't under Harrington's watch. Maria agreed. Bring photos of the bobcats. People need to see what's happening. Exhaustion hit Michael. Nearly 24 hours without rest. His gaze drifted to the photo of Caroline. What would you do, Caro? She had been the fearless one, unafraid to confront injustice head-on. A vehicle approaching snapped him back. Megan Foster arrived, rain gear and supplies in tow. Dr. Carter says you have a unique situation here. That's putting it mildly, Michael muttered, leading her to the mother bobcat and her cubs. Megan's eyes widened. They're inside? With no restraints? They're too weak to be a threat. And the mother, she understands we're helping. Megan glanced at Aspen, who calmly observed them. That's not possible. Yet here we are, Michael replied, grabbing his gear. I need to check something in the forest. Can you stay with them? Megan nodded. Where are you going in this weather? To find answers. Michael followed Whitewater Creek upstream. The signs were clear, something was deeply wrong. The water level was low, bird calls were absent, and even deer tracks were missing. Then he found the real horror. A dead fox, its muzzle stained with the same yellowish residue as Aspen's wound. He took soil samples, documenting everything. The acrid, sweet smell was stronger here. A rustle in the underbrush made him freeze. Michael reached for his sidearm, but relaxed when he saw a familiar face. "I thought I might find you here," Tyler said, adjusting his Forest Service cap. "You shouldn't be here." "Neither should you," Tyler countered. "But two sets of eyes are better than one. And I brought this." He pulled out a drone. Forest Service doesn't use drones. "This is mine. Want to see what's really happening?" Michael nodded. Within minutes, the drone revealed something chilling: unmarked chemical drums hidden behind an equipment shed. A makeshift drainage channel led straight into the watershed. "They're dumping something." Then, on the screen, movement. Security guards. One spoke into a radio. Another retrieved something from their vehicle. "They spotted us." Michael didn't wait. "We need to go. Now." Back at the cabin, Megan updated him. "The cubs are stable." Aspen ate a little. Then she hesitated. "Michael, the wildlife office called. They want the bobcats. When I refused, they said officials would come inspect them today." Michael's stomach dropped. Sheriff Lawson arrived, his face grim. "The county doesn't have jurisdiction over federal land. They're trying to eliminate evidence," Michael said. "We need to move them." The old fire watchtower at Blackridge. Remote. Federal jurisdiction. Safe. Pack what they need. Use my truck. Less suspicious. The watchtower became a makeshift sanctuary. Aspen settled in, her cubs huddled beside her. Michael climbed the tower to survey the land. From up here, the forest stretched endlessly. Then, something caught his eye. A flash of metal deep in the wilderness, another cluster of industrial drums. "My God, they have multiple dumping sites." Tyler volunteered to document it. "Be careful." As Michael prepared for his meeting with Agent Montgomery, his phone buzzed. Tyler's voice was urgent. "They spotted me. I think they're following." Then the line went dead. Michael swore. "We need to get to the watchtower. Now." Sheriff Lawson's cruisers sped through the forest. When they arrived, Tyler was breathless. "It's worse than we thought. A hidden pipeline is dumping straight into Whitewater Creek." Before they could react, dust rose in the distance. SUVs. Harrington's security. And Commissioner Finch. Michael, Montgomery, and Lawson met them at the base of the tower. Finch's practiced smile didn't fool anyone. "We're here for the bobcats." "They're evidence in a federal investigation," Montgomery countered. "Any attempt to remove them is obstruction of justice." Finch's mask slipped. "Harrington doesn't take kindly to interference." "And I don't take kindly to threats," Montgomery shot back. "Federal agents are en route. Leave now." Finch's eyes burned with barely concealed rage. This isn't over. But as his convoy drove off, Michael knew Harrington was losing control. At the town hall meeting that night, Harrington tried to sell his luxury resort as a win for the community. Then Michael stepped forward. "Before you vote, you need to see this." Agent Montgomery revealed the EPA's findings. Toxic chemicals in the water. Illegal dumping sites. Aspen's suffering. Harrington's confidence cracked. These claims are unfounded. Megan entered, phone in hand. "Not anymore." She played a video, Aspen and her cubs, their suffering undeniable. The crowd turned. "That's our drinking water," someone shouted. "My kids swim in the community pool." Harrington's attorney whispered frantically, but it was over. Agent Montgomery declared an environmental emergency. Mayor Wilson suspended all Harrington projects. Michael faced Harrington one last time. This fight is over. Harrington seethed. You have no idea who you're messing with. I know exactly who you are, Michael replied. And now, so does everyone else. Federal investigators shut down Harrington's operations. The EPA confirmed contamination in multiple locations. Harrington was indicted. Commissioner Finch resigned in disgrace. Months later, Michael visited Aspen and her cubs at their new home in a wildlife education center. The cubs were thriving. Aspen, healed and strong, met his gaze. Then, she did something extraordinary. She pressed her head lightly against his hand. A silent thank you. Michael smiled. You started all this. Back in Pine Ridge, Whitewater Creek ran clear once more. The forest had healed. And so had he.